Hi, I'm Lisa Fletcher, and you're in the stream. Today, how long will Syrian refugees live in desperation? We speak with displaced Syrians to find out what life is like at their refugee camps. Our digital producer, Malika Bilal, is here looking out for all your live feedback. Make sure you tweet her and use the hashtag AJStream. Malika, the number of displaced Syrians is estimated to be about 2.5 million, both inside and outside the country. Help reportedly reaching maybe 1.5 million. We've both been tweeting out a lot about this today. What's the community saying?
So we asked one specific question: who is responsible for the welfare of Syrian refugees? And we got lots of answers. And the one I'm pulling up now is a video response to that question.
Although it is the United Nations Relief and Rehabilitation Administration's responsibility to regulate and mandate international intervention and responsibility, international law does dictate that it is first and foremost the host country's responsibility to protect and aid any refugees in their land.
Of course, this is a live discussion, and we want to hear from you. So tweet us your questions and your comments with the hashtag AJStream.
And that's one of the questions we'll definitely want to talk about and answer today is whose responsibility is it? To my left, to Malika's right, Waz Mustafa. He is our studio guest today. He's a board member of the Coalition for a Democratic Syria. He recently arrived from the region where he visited all the camps in Turkey. Waz, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're looking forward to hearing about your trips and what you saw. To learn more about the conditions of Syrian refugees today, though, we are joined by three of our community members. Ayam and Mike are in our Google Plus Hangout. Ayam is a young Syrian who sought refuge in Jordan. He tried visiting some of the camps as a photographer, but was not allowed in. And Mike is an aid worker with regular access to the refugee camps. And also on the phone with us is a woman that we're going to call Siba. She's currently living in Lebanon. Out of fear for her personal security, she doesn't want us to reveal her identity. Siba's been working with Syrian refugees and is in the process of starting an NGO. So thanks to all of you for joining us. We're looking forward to focusing really on all of your personal experiences today.
Hi, I'm at Omar Badar. I love dispelling misinformation, and I'm in the stream.
The conflict in Syria is now in its 20th month, and it's forced more than 465,000 Syrians to leave their country, according to the UN. Most of them fled to neighboring countries like Turkey, Lebanon, Jordan, and Iraq in search of a better life. As the violence continues to displace Syrians, though, the UN expects the number of refugees to increase to more than 700,000 by January. And with temperatures plummeting as winter settles in, international aid groups warn the humanitarian crisis will only get worse for the millions of displaced Syrians inside and outside the country. At the refugee camps, Syrians are struggling every day. There's a shortage of basic necessities like food and water and heating. And the cold temperatures and the lack of medical resources are taking their toll on everyone, especially the most vulnerable. Hundreds of newborns are reportedly facing malnutrition. Now, conditions at these camps have been called harsh and appalling, and many Syrians are left wondering just how long they have to endure a life of desperation. So the question is, why are the living conditions at these camps so bad? And what is life really like for Syrians who are there? To help us answer some of these questions, we're joined from Amman, Jordan, by Panos Mumtiz. He is the UNHCR's Regional Refugee Coordinator for the Syrian refugee situation. Panos, welcome to the stream.
Hello, good afternoon.
What I'd like is for you to set the stage for us. Would you consider this humanitarian crisis a state of emergency?
It is really a situation which is extremely worrying. What we have seen continuously over the last few months is a deterioration of the humanitarian situation. On a daily basis, we're seeing 2,000 to 3,000 refugees who approach UNHCR and register with us or ask for assistance in the neighboring countries combined. Today, we have reached the figure of over 480,000 Syrian refugees who have registered or seek assistance in the neighboring countries, and this number keeps on growing quite rapidly. The actual number of refugees is actually much bigger because there is many more who are in the neighboring countries who have not come forward, and actually increasingly we see more and more coming forward and asking for help. What is of particular concern is the fact that 3/4 of these hundreds of thousands of refugees who have crossed are women and children. Actually, more than half of them are children. This is really a children's refugee crisis where we're seeing civilians, we're seeing people from within Syria who feel insecure and who are left with no other choice than to leave their place where they live and seek safety in the neighboring countries.
Muaz, who's responsible for these people?
No, I think that the host countries that are receiving them do bear sort of a major responsibility, as well as the international community as a whole. I think one important thing that hasn't been done is sort of an organization of all these different aid groups that are working on helping these refugees, just to better manage these incredibly growing numbers.
Disorganization among the organizations?
I think that that's part of it. I think if there is a greater sort of way of putting a commission or something together that can deal with them, it could help out a lot. In these countries have whatever capabilities they have, but they do bear some responsibility to help them out in the best way that they could, and the international community must be there to support them.
Well, our community is also weighing in how deplorable they think the situation is. Musa says conditions at all the Syrian refugee camps are of desperation with overstretched facilities. The world needs to do something. And Elisa, of course, you mentioned those personal stories. I want to go to our Google Plus Hangout now and talk to Ahem, who, as you mentioned before, is a Syrian photographer living in Amman, Jordan. And Ahem, I'd like to get your story. What is it that led you to make the difficult decision to leave Syria and go to Amman, and why did you choose Jordan?
First of all, I chose Jordan because maybe it was at the time the right choice for me, because I've been here in Jordan before everything happened in Syria last year. I've been here like few times, I think, yeah, maybe 3 or 4. So it was like a good choice, and for my work, so I can go to the maybe refugee camps or rework with my all those partners that I work with them here in Jordan. And yes?
No, go ahead.
Also that I had to leave because family safety comes first. That's what main responsibility for all the Syrians, that not just my safety or the personal safety, also the family, which it's come first always.
Mike Nikonchuk, you're inside these camps every day. How bad is it? Describe what you're seeing on the ground.
Well, honestly, running a camp is a very difficult thing to do, and there are so many agencies that are doing their best to make sure that people get access to the services that they need. But with the winter coming, well, the winter already here, it's a very difficult situation. I mean, I know from the UN's perspective, I've heard a very, only about 30 to 40% of the money that was allocated for the response has been given. So
Mike, you're being very diplomatic, and I appreciate that. But the object of the program today is to give people a real sense of what's going on, and you're there and you see these camps every day. Tell us what you're seeing with these people, with these children. I know you deal with the kids a lot, what they're experiencing. We may have lost the Google Hangout temporarily.
He brought up something that Rafif on Twitter, who's been a guest on the stream before, now wants to piggyback on. And I will direct this to you, Panos. This is a question from Rafif on Twitter, who says, please explain why international assistance is not reaching the intended recipients.
In terms of international assistance, I think there's been a lot of generosity from donor countries. However, what is really happening with the Syria situation is the fact that the humanitarian situation is deteriorating at a speed which is much bigger than the international community's ability to respond. At this point, we have only received 51% of the funding we have requested to help the Syrian refugees in the neighboring countries. And while we see a huge political interest on the Syria situation, on the humanitarian side, we feel frustrated. We feel that we don't have enough support to be able to respond to this crisis, where thousands of people are streaming the borders every day. Many people arrive in difficult circumstances. And indeed, we respond this effort that we have, the humanitarian agencies. We are a total of 52 organizations, 10 UN agencies, and 42 non-governmental organizations. The response is led by the UN High Commission for Refugees. And what we try to do, we have a coordination mechanism in Jordan, in Lebanon, in Iraq, and in Turkey. The programs are very different in each country. But the effort is very simple. It's really to provide life-saving, urgent assistance to those in need it, to be able to respond to these needs. At the same time, of course, the biggest worry we have is, have we seen the worst of this crisis, or is there more worse to come. We hope, of course, to see a political solution come to end this ongoing conflict. But in the meantime, as humanitarian actors, what we really want to make sure is that we have what we need to be able to respond to this crisis. I want to say two words about the children in particular, because we really see a significant number of children crossing the border, and we're working together with UNICEF, with Save the Children Fund, with other charities, and there's a particular focus looking after the needs of the children, both psychological. Many of them arrive traumatized. We see bedwetting. We see children, we hear from them, they have eyewitnessed or lived experiences that are really horrific for their age. So in our response, we try to tailor-make what needs to happen, but also we have to prioritize. Clearly, the means that are provided are not enough, so we're looking into how to provide the most urgent needs. Winterization, the preparation for winter is a top priority at the moment. Also, we have to keep in mind that the majority of the refugees are not in camp settings. Actually, in Lebanon, there is not a single refugee camp. All the people are hosted within host communities. More than 80% of the refugees in Jordan are within host communities. And these host communities is really heartbreaking to see Jordanian families, Lebanese families, who themselves live in very poor conditions, who barely make ends meet, and yet they open the house to receive and host another family. Of course, the focus is also in the camps, in the Zaatari camp in Jordan, or the 14 camps that are being hosted in Turkey, or the camps in northern Iraq, where effort is made to help the Syrian refugees who, at the moment, the temperature outside is really at night drops to 1 degree. So it's quite cold. It's actually raining as I speak. And many thousands of people live under tents in conditions which are quite harsh for these families to live.
Our community members are weighing in on the differences between the circumstances of refugees in different countries. Speedy Gonzalez says it's good to see Turkey opening arms out to these poor people who are caught up in this fight. And then Farah says Jordan is low on supplies for their own people, let alone the Syrian refugees. Arab Gulf states need to aid them. And then there's another on Jordan from Sekar who says, I was in the Zaatari camp last month and they said absolutely not, speaking of refugees, they'd rather go back to Syria than suffer in Jordan. And I'd like to get the view from Beirut. Let's speak to Siba, who's on the line from Beirut. Go ahead, Siba.
Hi, Lisa. Good evening.
It's actually Malika introducing you, but I'd like to know what you're seeing. You're, of course, a Syrian living in Lebanon, working with refugee communities. What are you seeing on the ground there?
Sure. Well, Lisa, I think everything that was said is true with the other people. I joined voices with them. In addition to one I think the essence of what's happening, the real problem, from what I'm seeing, is recognition to start with. There are lots of refugees here who are not even being recognized, if you see my point. Right now, I'm working with Ferde. We're working in Beirut. This is where I have the most experience and where I've seen most cases. The biggest problem is recognition. These people who are seeking asylum here in Lebanon do not know where to go. They do not know how to seek help, where to go to get help, because they're not recognized. So this is our first problem.
Siba, you were telling us a story the other day. You know, you're sneaking in and out. You're helping these refugees any way you can.
Sure.
And
Sure.
you've run into some unbelievable things. Tell us about what you were doing the other night after a Syrian infant had passed away. Tell us that story.
Yes. We had a child with a rare disease, and we had to bury him 2 days ago, and it was dramatic. I can't begin to explain how bad it was, especially with his parents. Even when we went up to the cemetery to bury him, we had to sort of talk the person who's in charge there in the cemetery to let us bury him, because it's not allowed. And he let us bury him at the very end of the cemetery, but we're not going to have this marble bit on his grave. So everything, I mean, every single thing that you have to go through as a refugee here is heartbreaking altogether. Not to mention how much trouble we had to even get him into hospital and to give him care. How much his parents had to go through.
Yeah. Panos, you know, there are consequences from the inadequate conditions at these camps. Last week, 3 children reportedly died from exposure. There are reports of young women being sold into marriage for about $5,000 US. And it's just out of desperation. These people's lives, they're trying to seek refuge and the destruction continues. What kind of attention is being paid to all of these downstream effects of the poor conditions at some of these camps?
Well, the protection of refugees is for us really the first and most important priority, and I think this is really crucial. First of all, ensuring that the refugees, from the moment they cross the border, there is a safe passage so they can arrive in safety in the neighboring countries, ensuring that the borders are open in the neighboring countries, but also once they are in the camps, of course, working very closely with the host governments to ensure that these people are in safety. Overall, I think that those who are in camp, and at the moment we're talking about Zaatari camp in Jordan, which is the one that has the largest, is one of the largest camps, but also the camps in Turkey. Every effort is made to ensure that the assistance is there. Actually, the assistance that is given in Turkey is a 5-star plus, I would say, very generously provided by the government of Turkey. Zaatari camp in Jordan, the conditions are tough. Every effort has been made to improve the conditions, have tents, gravel the camp, have schools, have services in place. But clearly, as much as we try to improve the conditions, the living conditions continue to be tough on the ground. We've had indeed 4 children who have died in Zaatari camp, but actually it wasn't because of the conditions. 2 have heart conditions that were back with them from even when they came in Syria. But this is not to say that the people are not going through a tough time. Actually, it's quite difficult for them. I would say the psychosocial impact, the psychosocial condition is really the worst. People who arrive with nightmares, having gone through difficult times. Many of them have left their loved ones behind. They worry about what's going to happen to them. And of course, what is interesting with the Syrian refugees is that they have all fled the country, but they also tell us they would like to be able to go back as soon as possible once the condition improves.
It's that idea of going back, Muaz, that I want you to chime in here. Maithal Hassan says, will you also be speaking on internally displaced? My family in Syria has even taken many in. We're talking a lot about the conditions outside, but what about the conditions for Syrians that are displaced within?
No, those are a huge problem. You have about, I think, 2.5 million internally displaced refugees.
It's a huge number, because we're talking about less than 500,000 externally.
That's 10% of the Syrian population in general. I mean, it is a giant number. And these guys have much harder time than refugees that have left the country. And speaking of going back, the refugees that have left sometimes have no more homes to go back to, and that's another challenge that needs to be faced. And I'm glad he mentioned sort of the psychological wounds, among other physical wounds that these people have to deal with. It's a hard trip to get out to these camps, and they come out with horror stories. You know, most of these children will have post-traumatic stress disorder that they have to deal with for forever in the course of their lives, including some major wounds, including spinal cord injuries and other stuff that we've seen that's really horrendous. But as far as the internally displaced refugees, the ones that are in the liberated areas in the north, they have a really rough time. And then the ones in the other cities where World Food Program, ICRC, and others have been helping, we have the announcement that the UN had pulled out mostly from Syria lately, so that is going to be way less assistance that goes to them. And the ones that have made it to places like Atme and in Idlib province and Aleppo province in the north really do have a hard time. There are no, UNHCR doesn't operate there, most NGOs don't. You have small sort of Syrian organizations that have came in and tried to help. And the aid that's given in is also very difficult to bring in. It has to be snuck in most of the time, and it's not an easy thing to do.
Well, speaking of that, the humanitarian crisis facing Syrian refugees has also generated a wave of online initiatives just by ordinary citizens, as well as some organizations, to provide help to struggling Syrians. And many have turned to the internet and to social media to collect cash donations, or blankets or coats or really anything that can be useful for these people. Some even send postcards to the Syrian kids. We spoke to a woman who launched something called the One Coat at a Time campaign. Her name's Nadia Alawa, and she started collecting coats for Syrian refugees in her own community, and then she turned to Facebook and it just exploded. We spoke with her earlier and she told us a little bit more about what she's doing to help in these areas.
One coat at a time is $25 for one coat. And Zakat Foundation will take the money and bring it to their person in Turkey who will go out and buy coats. Each coat would be, between $20 and $25. And then I have some activists that I've been working with and that has been very inspiring. And they'll be helping, distribute the coats and supervising and giving me feedback also and sending me pictures. They've also been helping me with putting up pictures on my event page.
If you're interested in Nadia's campaign or others, you can visit stream.aljazeera.com to find links to those AIDS initiatives. Siba, I want to get back to you. You work regularly with the refugees. We understand you're trying to start an NGO. Tell us a little bit about what drove you to do the kind of work that you're doing.
Well, Lisa, there are people they've got the right to live. We met them, and no one was doing this job, so we had to do it instead. I just want to correct one thing that's very, very important, especially in Beirut. There are no refugee camps for Syrians. Syrians headed straight to Palestinian camps where they were offered help by the Palestinians. It's the same old story, the vulnerable helping the vulnerable, because they're the people that know what these people are now going through. And this is what's happening right now. And this is what really drove us, because we also arrived here. I mean, now some of us are okay, we're standing on our feet, but when we arrived here, I slept in 6 houses when I first came. I had friends help me, give me money. I had to look for jobs. I didn't know where to go. I was also vulnerable. And then I went out there, I was helping the other people. This is what drove us, because we know how it feels. You've got a gap there that no one is filling, so you need to do it yourself.
Yeah, indeed. Panos, we've got less than a minute left. I want to give you a chance to wrap things up for us and tell us how are we going to move forward from here, assuming that the assault does not stop on the Syrian people?
Well, clearly there is no humanitarian solution to a humanitarian problem. It has to be a political solution. We hope very much to see some way forward in a way that some solution comes over. On the humanitarian side, the organizations are working together. We are responding really, so far we have managed to respond to the ongoing crisis. And at the same time, we worry about has the worst come, or is the worst still to come? So I think what's extremely important right now is for the international community to continue this international solidarity in a much stronger way, supporting the UN agencies, their NGOs, the humanitarian actors, giving us the funding that is needed to respond to this ongoing crisis. This is really extremely important at this crucial moment as we're going through the winter and the needs are increasing at a tremendous pace.
All right, thank you so much. We're going to hold our thoughts for now, but this discussion is going to continue in the online post show. But before we get to that, Malika's got some other story leads we're following.
A picture of a man taken moments before he was struck by a train in New York has some questioning the photographer's response. Ki Soo Khan was reportedly pushed onto the New York City subway tracks by an attacker who, as of yet, has not been identified. Han died from his injuries. The New York Post reported that their freelance photographer was repeatedly firing off his flash to warn the operator as he photographed Han's struggle to climb off the tracks. I just started running, hoping that the driver could see my flash. In that moment, I just wanted to warn the train to try and save a life, photographer R. Omar Abbasi said. But Micah Grimes sums up the outrage online over the photo. How about help the guy out? At least a few people on Twitter also noted the absence of help from other passers-by. Nobody is trying to help him, cynical tweets. While others questioned if the paper went too far by publishing the photo. I wonder if the New York Post editors considered how that man's kids would feel seeing a photo of their father about to be killed. The newspaper initially tweeted the story, describing it as a shocking video and pic, but later tweets seemed to show a change in tone. This is so sad. Tragedy on the NYC subway. This man is doomed after being pushed onto the track. R.I.P. Well, do you agree with the online criticism? Leave us a comment at facebook.com/AJStream and let us know. Lisa?
Thanks, Malika, and thanks to all of our guests today. The Post Show is next, so go to your computers right now. Log on to stream.aljazeera.com and join us for the rest of our discussion. Now, on our next show tomorrow, we're going to tell you why environmental activists in Malaysia are fighting against the world's largest refinery for rare earth metals. And before we end today, I want to give a special thanks to Matthew Kessel. He sent us a lot of those photos from inside the Turkish refugee camps. So be sure to join us for the Post Show, and we'll see you online. Welcome back to the Stream's online post show. We're going to pick up where we left off. We're talking about the situation for Syrian refugees, both inside the country at camps there and then a lot of the external camps at surrounding countries. Muaz Mustafa, you and I were talking earlier about this idea of the aid that's coming in. There's a lot of aid coming in from various countries, but is the aid to refugees necessarily coming in through the right channels so it's getting to the people in the most effective means possible?
You know, that's a good question. No, I think the way that aid is channeled really needs to be looked at. You know, for example, if you're sending aid to Jordan as an organization, as a Syrian American organization or something, and a lot of that aid, and not all of it gets there, right? So like 50% has to go, for example, to the Jordanian government or the distribution.
So the government's taking a cut.
In Jordan, that definitely from NGOs like Syrian American organizations, stuff like that, absolutely. When it comes to how we get aid into these liberated areas in Syria, that's very difficult. The Turkish government, I think, by far out of the neighbors, has been the most helpful to the Syrian people. They spent more than $340 million, have 100,000 or more than 100,000 refugees there, but it's still difficult to get aid inside of Syria through Turkish border police and so on. Yeah, I have, and I've got even videos of it on the way we did. It was literally going in there unofficially from the Turkish government or anything like that. It's sneaking it in.
Like you're sneaking in contraband, but you're sneaking in blankets and food or something.
At times there was humanitarian aid that was being snuck in, while there were also sort of weapons that were snuck in to aid the sort of military councils in the area and so on. In Khyber-Dizhos in Idlib province, it was literally just sort of hiking over a couple of mountains and going through the wire at the border and just bringing that in. That's very difficult, especially when you have 10,000, 15,000 refugees there. You need roads, you need trucks to go in and to help aid all of them. At times we can get that to happen. I know Muslim Without Borders, among other organizations, the Syrian American Medical Society have been very helpful, but it is very difficult to bring in that humanitarian aid, especially to these liberated areas where no UN bodies are operating.
Access. Our community members just don't seem to understand why, as of course that's the question we're asking today. May Saloon says there is a need and there are people willing to help. Why do we hear of children freezing to death? What's the problem? And another seems to place the blame on the Gulf. Rayhan says, where are Saudi, UAE, and the Gulf states? They need to assist refugees. History will hold those to account who turn their backs. I would like to go now to our Google Plus Hangout where Aham has a follow-up. Aham, go ahead.
Hey. I just wanted to say that there is like a trust issue here between the Syrians and the UNHCR. There is like a huge trust issue because helping is not the right solution for everything. Sometimes the support is more important, much more important than support, because you can't just help all the Syrians, because the Syrians want to help each other. The Lebanese want to help, the Jordanians want to help, everyone wants to help. Even I talk with people that live in Sweden or in USA or in any foreign country. They all want to help, they all feel us, which is so true. And you don't have to bring American or European guys to help us, because you can use the Syrian help, you can use the same language, the same mentality, the same energies, and it's not just the UNHCR. They are not the savior or the only salvation. The responsibility is upon all of us. The Syrian, even the Syrians that right now inside of Syria, they are still helping. The local campaigns we all see on the internet or in the social media networks, they all want to help.
Yeah, Panos, I want to get to you. Just a minute ago, Malika read a tweet from one of our viewers saying that the Saudi countries, the Gulf countries rather, are not doing enough. Is that the case? Are some countries dropping the ball here and not pitching in?
We understand that the Gulf countries, primarily Saudi Arabia, but also the Emirates, Qatar, Kuwait, have donated more than 250 or have collected more than $250 million in terms of humanitarian aid for the Syrian situation. A lot of the Gulf aids actually deliver the aid themselves, so they go through faith-based organizations in Jordan, in Lebanon, or actually in some parts of Syria. So I think there is a lot of generosity, and one of the issue or the challenges that we would like to see a closer coordination with these Gulf countries. We would like to see that we work together in terms of prioritizing, in terms of meeting the needs, and in terms of ensuring that there is no duplication for the assistance, so that the assistance reaches all the people, and that we're also able to prioritize, because clearly what we have is not enough to cover for everybody. So we're trying to look at vulnerables, at elderly, at female-led households, at children. So we really have to do this prioritization, as we're really struggling to make ends meet, having with less than half of the needs that are the funding that is needed to provide for the Syrian refugees.
And Waz, that's something you were talking about earlier, is just having better organization among the organizations and the governments. Siba, I want to get back to you. You've had some experience, some great experience actually, with how Palestinians are helping out. Why don't you tell us about that?
Yes, Lisa. This is why initially the Syrians, they head to the camps. Palestinians sympathize greatly with the Syrians because they went through it before, and you can never have enough experience being a refugee, because it's an accident, a very bad accident that happens to you. They were given mattresses, they were given food like rice and sugar. They were even hosted in their own homes, which are already simple. And these people are already living in camps that are in very bad situations. They've got rats, they've got bad electricity problems. Their wires are over the place. When it rains, you're walking around and you thank God if you're not too tall so that you don't get electrified. So the camps are already bad as it is, where the Syrians are going, where the Palestinians are originally staying, and still they're helping. These people already need that help because they're living in very, very bad conditions. The other tragedy is that there are Palestinian Syrians that were forced to leave Syria again, so that's like history repeating itself. And not only that, not only they were uprooted and brought in to neighboring countries where they were not properly attended to, let's say, but also if they stay longer than they should, they've got to pay penalties. So they're like, they don't know where to go anymore. I mean, they already sought asylum in one country, which is in this case Syria. Now they're seeking asylum in another country where they're not welcome to start with. So this is a great tragedy that we also brought up, and that really needs to be attended to. Another thing is I mean, although I agree very well with Ayhan that there's a big trust issue with UNHCR or these figures, because they don't looked at as protection figures, or they should be looked at this way because of what people are not receiving actually. When people are going up to the UNHCR, we had a case today, an emergency case, a guy that we sent up to the UNHCR to get registered. Apart from the fact that he had to wait all day in the sun and he was very badly treated, he was given an interview till up to 4 months, Lisa. Up to 4 months, winter is over, the guy's already frozen to death, the guy doesn't know where to go, the guy never got any protection that he should have gotten. So this is another thing. I understand, I appreciate everything that's been said through the official channels, that there's not enough resources and that there's so much to be done, but these are not my own words. The convention says, which the UNHCR belongs to and works through, it says these refugees are to be guaranteed basic rights. So trying is not enough. Yes, they need to prioritize.
Trying may not be enough, but there are definitely a lot of people trying their best. Waz, we've got about 30 seconds left. Why don't you just wrap it up for us? You just traveled to these areas. Sure.
Look, one thing that wasn't mentioned today that I think is very important is that, especially with the internally displaced Syrians, is that you have, and as the UNHCR representative said, you have mostly children, and school and education is something that is essential. And to have a whole generation that is uneducated, that's illiterate, that's missed these very important years, that's another very important thing to focus on, and we can never sort of ignore it, regardless of all the other sort of humanitarian misery that these people are living through. At the end of the day, they're all hopeful to go back. In one town where we were able to sort of help civilian administrative council take control and so on, we already had people come back from the refugee camp in Kilis in Turkey. And I must admit that when I saw the Turkish refugee camps, those were model camps, I think. Not perfect, but something that other countries should
Waz, Panos, Siba, Ayam, and Mike, thank you all for joining us today. Great discussion. Please, everyone, join us again tomorrow. We're going to be talking about Malaysia. There are environmental activists there who are fighting against the world's largest refinery for rare earths metals. Until then, we'll see you online.
My name is Muaz Mustafa. I work for the Syrian Revolution.
Sorry, they weren't quite ready.
Okay.
That was my fault. Now they're ready.
My name is Muaz Mustafa. I work for the Syrian Revolution, and I'm in the stream.
Do you want one that's slightly longer, or is that good?
Me? Or them? Okay, I was good.
Okay, they're good.
All right, awesome.
Fabulous. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I hope I was helpful. I didn't.